Many of Dr. King's bows include journalism, television presenter, documentary filmmaker, university lecturer, live event production and leader of historical expeditions. Like Sir John Monash, Dr. King places high value on education, both formal and informal, and his life and work experiences most certainly demonstrate this. So it is our great pleasure to welcome Dr. Jonathan King to the microphone.
But last time I was here, I was the lowest of the low. Thanks, Ross, I'm glad you're laughing. So it's a welcome relief for me to have, even to have made it into town this time. Because, according to this diary of mine, 1963, which I kept as a humble junior jackaroo on nearby Bundoora sheep station in 1963, and I'll quote, "The mean and nasty overseer says he's going to punish me just for leaving my saddle on the ground during my lunch break. Now," he says, "I can't go into Jerilderie for at least a month." End of quote. So it's very lucky that I did. So we made sure we didn't bring any rain from wet and windy Sydney. But thanks, Ruth, you just left one thing out of my CV. I've now been promoted to grandfather, and Jane and I have got 9 grandkids. Now the talk is about World War I's Lieutenant General John Monash, Commander of the Australian Corps. Field Marshal Montgomery said, "I would name Sir John Monash as the best general on the Western Front in Europe." But, here's the but, Monash was cold-shouldered by Australia's official war correspondent and World War I historian Charles Bean, who deliberately downplayed Monash's victories, saying in his diary, "I think it would be better to lose the war than to be led to victory by a Jew." Later, teaming up with Prime Minister Billy Hughes and Keith Murdoch, Rupert's father, this treacherous troika tried to stab Monash in the back on the eve of his greatest victory at Hamel on the 4th of July 1918. And this is the subject of our film. As you know, a prophet is never recognised in his own country, but 100 years later, we're going to try and fix that with a new cinema film. Let's use the centenary to recognise this great community-driven leader, Monash, because Australia and the world, and especially America, needs better leadership examples than Donald Trump. To speak for 40 minutes. And I've been asked to talk about, after my introduction, Jerilderie's influence on your speaker, and that inspired the film, and Jerilderie's influence on Monash. And finally, give you some revelations, a few little quotes from the film. Finally, if anybody's still awake, we'll take questions. Turning to the introduction, 100 years ago today, Australia had just fought the Battle of Pozieres and suffered 23,000 casualties in 6 weeks, our worst total battle toll. And I've just come back from France, commemorating the 100th anniversary of Fromelles, which was Australia's worst ever one-day battle, which you know claimed the lives of 2,000 of our soldiers in one afternoon, killed when British General Sir Richard Haken ordered them to charge in broad daylight against German machine guns, which absolutely cut Monash up and inspired him to want to take control of his Australian forces. So this World War I centennial event is a great credit to Jerilderie, and it's such a good place to have it, because country people have time and loyalty to care about Australian history. And I reckon it's an honour to be delivering the 9th Jerilderie Monash Oration following such impressive predecessors, as the Honourable Tim Fisher, who's kindly here tonight and who deserves national support for his campaign for the posthumous promotion of Monash to the rank of Field Marshal. It's already supported this town. Yep, big clap there, Tim. Already supported by this town. What a visionary thing for Jerilderie to do. He'll go down in history as the first one to put your name to it. With that Jerilderie proposal, is that what it's called, Tim? Yep. Which should be achieved by the 100th anniversary, the end of World War I, November 2018, and we also plan to release our film. I also want to congratulate the Monash scholar, Trevor Coleman, for asking me to produce the film. Are you here, Trevor?
I am.
There he is. He's been absolutely instrumental in getting this film up, and I think we give him a hand. He's working on it as an associate producer and he's driven all the way from Victoria today, so good on you. And Jane and I want to thank Irene Wells of Jerilderie Station for, in a temporary lapse of concentration, recommending me. And Irene, over there in her beautiful pink dress, is having us to stay. And I first met Irene, saw her standing there, as the Beatles said, in 1962 at the Jerilderie Roundup. And I would have asked her for a dance, but there was this mean-looking codger over in the corner who was wearing a wedding ring called Ross Wells. And Ross is a great history maker himself. From Jerilderie Station, his rounds a legendary success. He's led the industry as a breeder and also a judge, serving Australia, South America, New Zealand, etc. So, with a track record like that, I kept well away from Irene. But look, turning to Jerilderie's influence on your speaker, which has inspired this film. If I can switch to a lighter vein, I can tell you that I inspired my beautiful bride Jane, sitting there in the blue, to come out from England in 1975 with The Romance of the Outback. I lured her from darkest, dampest London by reading the bush poet, Banjo Patterson's Fancies of Overflow, promising her a vision splendid of the sunlit plains extended and at night the wondrous glory of the everlasting sun. And she swallowed it. So I took her straight to Balmain, where we bought a little cottage. Anyway, those were the captivating lines that inspired me, after leaving Geelong Grammar in 1960, to come up to the bush and start my working life on Bunbury Station, near Jerilderie, as you know. But later on, as a homesick jackaroo who wanted Jane to love our Aussie bush as much as I did, the first book I gave her was Neville Shute's A Town Like Alice. She fell for that hook, line and sinker. And no vision of Balmain in her mind. But don't worry about A Town Like Alice. There's no town like Jerilderie for producing great history, from Ned Kelly to Billy Brownlee. I'm a Geelong supporter. But look, there's been so much history made in and out of this town, it's staggering. And I think the town is really displaying its heritage well. So look, it's good to be back in my old hometown. And my teacher here wasn't William Elliott. My teacher here was Fred Hutchins, the manager of Bunbury Station for the New Zealand Australian Land Company, who taught me many life skills, with his overseers too, and inspired me to reach for the sky even though he was a tough boss. Some of you might have read Fred's book, Big Company, and there are people here, I think Terry Hogan, who served on the council with Fred in the early 70s. He was a bit of a legend, old Hutchins, but he had a big impact on me. For a Melbourne boy arriving here, it was a bit like that 1970s film, Waking Fright, starring a fellow jackaroo, Jack Thompson. telephoned for a city boy. Jack said, look, he's a mate of ours. When he first arrived at his station out of Hay, he got off the train, the 15-year-old kid got off the train. The overseer took a look at him and said, there's no work here for boys. Get back on the train. He said, please sir, I'm actually an orphan. I don't have parents. So they took Thompson in and gave him a go. And that's why he performed so well in that film. But looking back now, it seems to me like there was slave labour around this place for a pittance. Admittedly, I got tobacco, tucker and a bed, but you can see from this pay slip, so I just happen to have it, that I got less than £7 a week. And I was hoping Fred might be here or somebody from the company, because I want a bit of an increase. I've gone back through the diary and looked at how much work I did, and it was a lot more than £7 a week. Anyway, the thing was that I survived. And when one jackaroo arrived at Bundy's siding and lifted his golf clubs down off the train, he was told to get straight back on the train by the boss, who said, you haven't come to a bloody holiday or resort, son. There's no place here for toffs with golf clubs. Get on your way. And he went with the train, never even come down. Sitting around a campfire, I saw the boss sack a jackaroo who rolled his own cigarette and then searched for a packet of matches and lit it up. The boss looked at him and said, you can pack your bags tomorrow, son. Anybody who wastes matches when there's a perfectly good fire going won't make a good manager. Off he went. When I came back very late from the Jerilderie Roundup dance, I saddled the night horse, rode out in the dawn light, listening for the horse bell, but not noticing a fallen tree, which spooked my horse, which tossed me onto the log and I landed on my kneecap. Ow. I think I've broken my kneecap, Mr. Hutchins, I said at orders that morning. Serve you right, but trying to catch the horses in your fancy dinner suit, half drunk. Well, can I go to town to see the doctor? I asked painfully. No, you're going in anyway at the end of the month. You can see him then. To this day, my broken patella bone causes me pain, and I'm being treated by a physio. But too late for Complo. But there were a few rebels who taught me tricks, and I remember the first day I climbed into the sulky with the old head stockman, Jack Matthews. Old Jack Matthews, a bit of a legend around here. He was teaching me how to check for fly-blown sheep and outlying paddocks. Within minutes of setting off in the old sulky, he pulled up behind a clump of cum trees. Why are you stopping here, Jack? I thought the paddock was miles away. It's a call of nature, son. What, already? I replied, having carried out my ablutions as directed by the overseer. Yeah, my boy, you see, the first thing you've got to learn is to train your bowels to empty during the boss's time. So he's paying for it. And look, there were many unexpected twists and turns, and I'll just quote you one more thing from my little diary. On the 14th of October, 1963, we had a mustering drama. Having camped in my swag in one of the back paddocks, next morning after taking the hobbles off and hitching up the horse, it bolted, sulky and all, heading back to the homestead, and my dog went too. So I had to walk all the way back on foot. But I did find a sixpence on the way. But look, things did go from bad to worse, because the overseer, when he said, you're not going to go to town for a month, leaving the saddle on the ground, he also said, you're going to have to go on horse-tailing for a month. Horse-tailing means get out at 4 AM for a month. And then when I tried to explain what happened, he said, you've answered back, that's another month. Then, when I was walking back from the horse yards later, he rode up on his horse, and I said, I think we could cut down the Bathurst spurs more effectively if we used the old lip rather than a sulky. He looked down from his high horse and said, so you're not paid to think. I don't want any more of your ideas. Right? That was a bit of a turning point for me. That's when I decided that I might graduate from the bush. And after a few years, having shaped up enough of Banjo Patterson's romance, I embarked on a correspondence course, then set exams for my matriculation, now called VCE or HSC, under the watchful eye of the keen-eyed policeman in an old police building next to the lockup, where Ned Kelly imprisoned the police he took captive when he robbed the bank. I also wrote my exam papers on an old table that was so rickety, I wondered if it was the same one Kelly had used to write his infamous Jerilderie letter. Lucky my exam paper was not 8,300 words, like Ned's letter. But after studying history at Melbourne University and marrying Jane, I began to think, our history's so good, we've got to teach people about it, let's do reenactments. And so we embarked on a whole series of reenacting history's greatest yarns by reenacting them. Luckily, I'd also learned to tell a few yarns around the campfire on Bundoora Station. So I produced a centennial reenactment in Corryong of Banjo Patterson's Man from Snowy River, and then a centennial reenactment of Banjo's Waltzing Matilda in outback Winton, Queensland. We changed then from horses to a donkey and reenacted Mary and Joseph's biblical story for the millennium, the year 2000, in Palestine. Then, with the centenary coming up of Gallipoli, I led battlefield tours over there, produced television documentaries and films, and interviewed the last 10 Anzacs who fought there, the last soldiers who were eyewitness accounts to get the true story. Then along came the Western Front centenary. For the start of the Western Front, and as I said, I've just come back from Fromella, and I interviewed the last 10 veterans who served on the Western Front under Monash. Men who could say to you, yeah, I served under Monash. He was the only general who ever came into the frontline trenches. I remember it clear as day. So we did a whole series, but perhaps the most significant one was the First Fleet reenactment, when we reenacted the voyage in 1988 of the London to Sydney convict fleet that brought the first Europeans to Australia. We did that for the 200th birthday. And that's where I won this medal. I won this medal presented by the then Prime Minister, who may remain nameless, Bob Hawke, in 1989 as an Australian Achiever of the Year. All these stories, by the way, he says rather modestly, are in this book, Tall Ships and Tall Tales, which is at the front end of the door. But to create those traditional Australian stories, I needed that toughness that I got from old Red Hutchins, because by then, Canberra-based bureaucrats had decided that a lot of Australian history was politically incorrect. And they tried to stop it. In fact, this poster here, a bit hard to see, but it says, "Dead White Miss." One of the Sydney newspapers attacked me. It's me raising the Australian flag. They attacked me, can't really see it, but because I kept perpetuating what they considered in Sydney dead white miss, Banjo Patterson's stories and things like that, in the First Fleet. So you needed to be pretty tough. And the Canberra bureaucrats were particularly tough. And when we did the Man from the Snowy River, they attacked us for being sexist and said we had to change the name to the Person from the Snowy River, because it was such a snub for women. So look, it was a good thing I went to Bundoora and got some of those skills. But after decades of producing reenactments of great men and great women, I realised that the greatest Australian of all was in fact Jerilderie's John Monash. Now let's turn to Jerilderie's influence on Monash. Once upon a time, a horse trader from Victorian country village rode into town, dismounted on the main street out there, handed his reins to a young boy and said, "Mind this horse for me, son, I'll give you a shilling." The boy did, the rider returned, gave him the shilling, then rode back down the main street and into history. It was 1877. 1877, the writer was of course Ned Kelly and the boy John Monash. Although most of you have grown up with that story, you may not know that Monash actually told Melbourne's Table Talk magazine in 1929 that he valued that exciting encounter just as much as meeting the royals at Buckingham Palace after World War I. And of course, after inspecting the town and its supplies, Kelly returned to a successful Jewish shopkeeper, Louis Monash, and sold him 4 white ponies. And the house is just down the street there that Louis Monash lived in. And of course, Kelly then went into the Royal Mail Hotel, stole £2,100 from the Bank of New South Wales, it was in one of the back buildings there, and locked up Louis Monash. So Monash's dad was locked up alongside of his teacher, William Elliott. In fact, Elliott had to hold the bag open while the Kelly gang put all the goodies into it from the bank. So Monash, his family, his teacher, they were all involved with this Ned Kelly moment. And then, of course, there were ongoing lessons from Monash because he got insights into the rebellious soldiers from the bush, some of whom he had to command, and they were pretty rebellious, some of them in World War I. And he told Table Talk magazine in 1929, he said, you know, that Kelly and his gang would have made great soldiers in World War I. But of course they didn't live that long. Secondly, Monash never traded in horses himself, but he certainly worked as a drover, mustering goats on foot for their owners, bringing them in for milking from the common. We love mustering goats, Monash said later, and we copied the bullock team drivers, swimming our goats across the waist-deep Wongamong Creek. We also organised goat cart races down the main street, just out the front there, decking the harness gates with red ribbons, racing them up and down. And Monash said he also hitched rides with bullock drivers and rode his little bayonet alongside the drovers. Now all of that would have given Monash a feel for the real bushman that he was commanding some years later, and whose lives he tried so hard to save. In fact, he said in one of his books, the country boys made the best soldiers. As soon as they captured an enemy trench, they'd scrounge around for some firewood and scraps of tin, and within minutes they'd light a fire, boil the billy, build a roof over their heads, and have a really nice home. Nobody said that the boys from the bush in Australia could do that. You know, he'd say the Brits would get in there and say, please sir, what do we do next? But not Australian country soldiers. Now his teacher, the 24-year-old Irishman, William Elliott, said later he thought Monash from the start had a studious turn of mind, was working too hard, studying German. This is in Jerilderie, the little school. Jane and I went there today to do a talk in the little school. German, French, Hebrew and music. In addition to his schoolwork at night, he was studying geometry and Latin. This kid is not even 13. He said it'd be too much of a strain on his mind, but Monash coped with the strain after a couple of years. Elliott told Monash's parents, your son's a genius. He's going to waste in the straw to a bush school. You've got to send him to Scotch College down in Melbourne and make him study. And the Jerilderie teacher said he'll make his mark on the world because of his aptitude for mathematics. In fact, the Jerilderie teacher went further later and said, I actually predicted he would go on to make his mark in the world. Now this is an old oak tree that's got its roots in Jerilderie. This is gold for you people, with the centenary of World War I coming up that Monash helped us win. And looking back, Monash said that this Jerilderie teacher had laid the foundations of my education and shaped my early career as an engineer. Now, to turn to the part of our talk which looks at the film we're making. Some revelations from our research so far. What Monash achieved in World War I as a commander was more amazing than we thought before we embarked on this film. Because, apart from fighting the Germans on the front line, he had to fight a vicious battle behind him, what he called a pogrom, a Jewish word for a religious assassination, really, from a treacherous anti-Semitic press and political troika, Charles Bean, Keith Murdoch and Billy Hughes. Let's examine the motives that we've researched in this film of this troika. Remember, Monash was there in World War I, 1918. He's trying to win the war and save the lives of these kids from Jerilderie and other country lads. Why? Why did they want to pull him down? Because all of them thought Monash was not a professional soldier. He shouldn't be able to lead. Shouldn't be able to lead the Australian Army. He's just a civilian from the reserves, and he's got the wrong social background. Lower class, really. He wasn't even a Christian. His parents were distrustful, German-speaking Prussian migrants. How could you let someone like that lead Australia? Charles Bean, the journalist, the official journalist, hated Jews, worshipped white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, blonde, blue-eyed country boys, and he writes about, I've done a few books on Gallipoli, and he's writing about it in almost a worshipful way. Keith Murdoch, the kingmaker, the journo, unlike his son, whose explosive Gallipoli letter had already forced the evacuation. The Allies really only pulled out of Gallipoli because of that Gallipoli letter. I don't know if you've read it, but it's just so explosive. So Murdoch thought, I'm the real general around here. He wanted to create a new nation of Australia during the First World War. Remember, Australia's only 14 years old when we landed Gallipoli. And he said we should shape the image of Australia during this war with a leader who fitted the ideal type of a WASP, a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. That was the kingmaker. Billy Hughes, the Prime Minister, his motive, he was terrified. I don't know if you've seen photos of Billy Hughes and John Monash together, but he was terrified of Monash having too much power. If he led the Australian Army Corps, after the war he could stand for the elections and defeat little Billy Hughes. And Hughes was terrified of that idea because Monash was so popular by then. For a start, he would have 300,000 votes from the 300,000 soldiers under him. So their solution, replace Monash with the well-known General Brudenell White from the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. That was their plan. When you think about Monash's achievements in a nutshell, with all this going on behind him, it's staggering. Because I mean, he landed with everyone else at Gallipoli, you'll remember, on the first day. He'd served at Gallipoli the full 8 months without a break, won the respect of the Anzacs. Of course he hadn't led any great victories, but you tell me what great victories there were, apart from the landing. Lone Pine cost 2,000 Australian lives. So, all the last 10 Anzacs from Gallipoli I interviewed, they all said, when you stop glorifying Gallipoli, it was a terrible failure. And the last veteran, Ted Matthews, who's a real mate of mine, he said, will you tell them to stop glorifying Gallipoli because they should be talking about the war in the Western Front because we won that one. We're embarrassed about having to retreat from the British-led campaign at Gallipoli. Now it was Monash. It was Monash who led them to those victories on the Western Front. From 1917 and especially 1918, battles like Messines, where they had the 19 mines blowing up the Germans. 1918, Villers-Bretonneux. And then Hamel, the big turning point. 4th of July. Guess why he fought it on the 4th of July? When he led the first Americans into an international war. Ever. The first Americans. Who they lead? A bloke from Jerilderie Primary School. So that's a huge achievement. And then after he won the Battle of Hamel in 93 minutes, I know he said it would only take 90, but it's pretty close. He then co-led the Battle of Amiens, earning a knighthood from King George V, who drove into the battlefield quickly to knight him straight after the Battle of Amiens. And then, of course, Monash led all these mop-up battles right through to October, the Battle of Montbretagne. Why was he winning? Because he'd invented this all-arms strategy. Being an engineer, inspired by William Elliot here at Jerilderie, he had worked out that, look, they've invented these things called airplanes. They've invented these things called tanks. They've invented these things called heavy artillery. Let's use them. Let's not go back to the cavalry, men charging against machine guns. Now look, there are many books telling the story of Monash's military achievements in detail, starting with Monash's own book, Australian Victories in France, 1918. And there are many books about his whole life, some of which I have here. And you've seen Geoffrey Searle's definitive biography, the first real one, followed by Roland Perry, the outsider who won a war, and more recently, Grant Keyser, Monash, the soldier who shaped Australia, and Tim Fisher's wonderful portrait, Maestro John Monash, Australia's greatest citizen general. There are heaps of them. And in fact, I've even written about him quite a bit myself. Great battles in Australian history, there's in 2 or 3 of those chapters. And also, the Western Front, the Anzacs' own story, battle by battle, in which Monash dominates. But he's more than a military leader. He's in a book called Great Australian Speeches, among all the politicians and all the great leaders. And in that, he's quoted as one of the great speechmakers of all time. So, there's no shortage of information for Jerilderie people if you want to read up on Monash. But in the remaining time I have, I can just tell you about that one make or break moment when he was leading the army, in the lead up to Hamel. And that is the specific focus of our film. It's a bit of a sneak preview here, which is appropriate for Jerilderie. And it's really starts with kind of the disaster of Passchendaele, which was a terrible battle for July through to October in 1917, and then and Monash says there's got to be a better way. We cannot throw thousands and thousands of men to their deaths in these dreadful conditions, because it was raining, boggy, and impossible to even walk, let alone charge ahead against the Germans. And so we're focusing on the Western Front because that was the main event, of course, because, and Monash had said himself, and we're trying to honour this, the story of the glorious and decisive victories of the RAF on the Western Front will re-echo throughout the world and live forever in the history of our homeland. But that echo hasn't happened because of the focus on Gallipoli and also the horrors of the death toll on the Western Front, 61,000 Australians. It's front page news that somebody's killed in Syria, Australia or Afghanistan, whatever, and rightly so. But imagine hearing that 61,000 were killed in the battlefield on the Western Front. And that was just so horrible for our population to absorb after Gallipoli. And then, as I said, when he wrote his history of World War I, Bean downplayed Monash. Just before he died, Bean said, "I'm sorry, I got it wrong. He was actually one of Australia's greatest soldiers." But the anti-Semitism had moved on by then. People weren't so anti-Semitic. And as you know, Western Front was 5 times greater than Gallipoli. 5 times more Australians fought there. 250,000 Aussies went there, not 50,000. They were there for 5 times longer. They fought 5 times more battles, won 5 times more Victoria Crosses, and sadly lost 5 times as many lives. 46,000, more than you can get in the Sydney Cricket Ground, were killed in action on the Western Front as against 8,709 at Gallipoli. The Australian troops, 5 divisions, only representing 9% of all Allied forces, well above their weight. They did, and this is the Western Front. And some people you asked, what do you think of the Western Front? They think, oh, you mean the Western suburbs? What, Sydney? So no, it's another battle. Oh, you fought somewhere else apart from Gallipoli, did they? So we've got a real problem, not only for Tim's campaign, but just generally, to get the Western Front recognised. And in fact, inspired by Monash, since the 90th anniversary of the end of World War I, we've been campaigning to switch the spotlight from Gallipoli to the Western Front. We've decided run to hold the first ever Anzac Day service at Village Presbyterian, which has got the war with 11,000 Australian missing on it. Anyway, that was a bit of a turning point, and they didn't dare after that. The Canberra bureaucrats, DVA, Office of Commonwealth, they didn't dare cancel that service because the people knew that it was the right place to have an Anzac Day service. Anyway, our film tries to use the 100th anniversary to set the record straight. Our aim is to show Monash was motivated, not by love of warfare, but by love of his men. Many from the countryside, Jerilderie district, etc. Monash, the engineer, said the true role of the infantry soldier is not to waste itself on heroic physical efforts, nor wither away under a merciless machine gun fire, or impale itself on hostile bayonets, but to advance under the maximum protection of mechanical resources, aeroplanes, dropping bombs, tanks, heavy artillery, mortar and machine guns, to minimise the loss of life. One of the first things he says in our film to General Haig, in charge of the British and the Allied forces, I think we could win the war if we were killing less men. And Haig said, killing less men? Killing less Germans? He said, no, killing less of our own men. We're running out of them and they won't recruit, blah, blah, blah. And that's straight from a conversation we have recorded. So the film opens in late 1917, third year of the war, as the Germans, and on the screen there'll probably be titles saying, by September 1917, the third year of World War I, as the Germans appeared to have the upper hand on the Western Front, and the British forces, having lost millions, were exhausted, all eyes were on the Australian Imperial Force, which had just arrived in 1916, fresh from Gallipoli.